Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Just a couple of comments on this tax cuts for the rich, the plutocrats demanding the maintenance of the Bush tax cuts. I wouldn't do it in that form. I wouldn't just make it automatic. But if you're rich and you can prove, and it's easy, you can set up easy ways to document this. If you can prove that you lent that money to a real commercial bank, there are still some local regional commercial banks that do give loans for plant and equipment. They're increasingly rare. That bank can issue a piece of paper that says they lent us the money and we lent it to company X and they created 5 jobs. And if the deduction is some amount per job created that can be assigned to this, prorated or divided up according to some formula, yeah, sure. Then you can have a nice big tax cut. No problem with tax rebates, tax reductions, provided you do create the jobs. But the Republican position is, those are job creators. Give them the money. They automatically create jobs. Well, that's, trust but verify. So let's verify that they did it. And then, of course, sure, then you can have a nice tax cut. The problem is, of course, that the plutocrats, the bankrupt, degenerate elite of the United States, the top 1% to 2%, don't invest in real plant and equipment. They invest in derivatives. They go to Goldman Sachs and say, hey, give me a piece of Abacus, give me a piece of the Timberland rotten hedge fund, let me have Toxie, the toxic asset. Or they send the hot money over to Singapore, Budapest, whatever the hot money market of the moment, the hot money market du jour might be. And that's the problem, that the assurance that they create jobs is simply malarkey and baloney. And you'll see, they'll scream, they'll say, oh, no, that's communism. No, that's just dirigism. That's the Kennedy investment tax credit that they praise in other contexts. That with the Kennedy investment tax credit, of course, was that if you were a company, you invested in technological improvements, you'd get a tax rebate. Let's go back to that. The other way to do it, I would say, is the following. Rather than looking at the rates, let's look at the standard deduction and the personal exemptions. Back in the 1930s under the New Deal, these were large enough to protect a very significant portion of the income of a family from taxation. And we can go back to that, right? The standard deduction right now is something like 12,000, might be going up a little bit. It is indexed. But why not increase that radically? Why not make the standard deduction per family something more like 20 to 25,000? Let's be generous and let's give a standard deduction of 25,000 per family. And then let's look at those personal exemptions, and they're in the realm of 3,500, 4,000 each, I think, by now, maybe a little bit more. Let's get them up to 25,000 as well. You'd have a situation then where a family of 4 would have no tax to pay on the first $125,000 of income. That would all be shielded from taxation. But you see what we're doing? We're starting from the bottom up. We're not giving tax cuts on the marginal rates paid by fantastically wealthy parasitical plutocrats. We're starting at the bottom, and we're giving the tax relief where it counts most to working families. And again, if you could bring in your standard deduction and your personal exemptions in that a ballpark of $20,000 to $25,000 each, you would be protecting something like 100,000 to 125,000 of income starting from the bottom. The first 125,000 would pay no tax. And the obvious ways you make up that revenue, well, start with the Tobin tax, the Wall Street sales tax, the securities transfer tax. Revive the corporate income tax. I hear the plutocrats are complaining about the corporate income tax. They don't pay it. I think by now they're just tired of having to avoid it. They found all the ways to avoid it. Goldman Sachs paid 2%. We've been saying 2% in 2008, I believe, on their stellar income, but they just don't like the inconvenience of avoiding it. And you can go on down the line. So another way to do it, if you want to grant some immediate relief, is rather than doing the percentages, we had Limbaugh, who makes $58 million a year. Limp Paw, the tool of Buckley and Kissinger and so forth, who makes $58 million a year, wants a 10% cut off his taxes. Now, figure that amount compared to what you would get. Instead of using percentages, I don't think that's fair. They say it's fair. It's not fair. Just give flat sums of money, a tax credit of $3,000, a tax credit of $5,000. It's the same for everybody. Nobody gets more than anybody else. It's equal for all. This would be a progressive form of tax relief, not regressive. Regressive is where the top earners get the biggest benefits. I think you get the idea. Finally, in this week of WikiLeaks, we've got to say a few words about our dear friend Assange. You'll notice Assange, who made his debut as a blonde, is now a brunette. And I think the idea is that the word has gotten out that Assange comes from the Hamilton Burn LSD, psychopharmaca, and God knows what kind of sexual combination cult. This is Anne Hamilton Byrne operating a cult in the suburbs of Melbourne, Australia, back in the 1970s. And if we want to put a label on this, the label is MK Ultra. We are dealing with a zombie product of an MK Ultra operation 40 years ago. And apparently he's realized that the blonde hair gives away the cult background, because one of the things that Anne Hamilton Byrne did was to adopt all these kids, these poor waifs, these orphans that came into her possession, and she was going to use them essentially as human guinea pigs. It's a little bit like the Nazi doctors in World War II, but they were going to become guinea pigs for what you could do to addle somebody's brain with LSD and psychopharmaca. She also dyed all of their hair blonde. They all became blonde as a badge of belonging to the Anne Hamilton Byrne cult. Now, when we look at the most recent WikiLeaks, what do we find? Generally speaking, the rule is the CIA hit list is what is reflected in the WikiLeaks targeting. If you're on the CIA hit list, you get slammed or mocked or otherwise denigrated. If you're a loyal U.S. puppet, then you have much less to worry about. And the obvious place to start is, as we've stressed before, the thing I think that challenges the U.S. and the British more than anything is the Italy-Russia relation. And people who now begin to chuckle about Berlusconi and his showgirls and his wild parties, well, simply you got to look at it at the level where these things are actually decided. Virtually all of them have some amazing secret, some skeleton in the closet. They're attacking Putin, of course, is dictatorial. He doesn't like democracy. Berlusconi is someone with the wild parties. And above all, the axis between them, the strategic alliance, because that's what it is, of Italy and Russia, is targeted. They say that Berlusconi is now becoming the spokesman for Putin and the Russians inside the European Union. Now, the reason for this is quite obvious. There's something called the South Stream pipeline. NATO and the U.S. hate it because it allows a reliable distribution of natural gas from Russia into Western Europe without these various kamikaze puppet states, the Poles, or the Polish regime, let's say, and the Ukrainian regime, and the Baltic states regimes. They are not allowed to cut it off. So it goes around those potential saboteurs, and it means that you can't get a crisis going when you want to. We're told that Sarkozy is the emperor with no clothes. He's authoritarian. Remember, Sarkozy has crossed them up in his struggle to survive. He's crossed them up on the Tobin tax. And remember, once you become president of France, that hand of de Gaulle, right, the hand that designed those institutions, begins to grab you, and you're being forced to act more like the president of France. Yeah, the Saudis want to bomb Iran. We knew that. I've written that up myself. We're told that Cristina Kirchner Rodriguez of Argentina is no good. We know that they hate her. Anyway, you go through the list, you can see the reasons. They hate these people. The CIA hit list is the hand that guides what WikiLeaks puts out. WikiLeaks is a controlled hangout operation of the CIA, and that is the the verdict on them. So don't be duped. Don't fall into this trap of the Pentagon Papers and Ellsberg. This is simply a re-edition, an attempt to duplicate that using some very dubious material. And we'll see you next week here on World Crisis Radio. Keep in touch on Tarpley.net. In the meantime.